Okay, so we are here to bridge the gap between 6 words and like 75,000 words by talking about the short story. And how many here want to write short stories or write them? Everybody, well, almost everybody. Okay, so we have here a couple of experts in short stories. Catherine Dilts is the author of the Rock Shop Mysteries, and her short stories appear regularly in Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine. She wrote 2 novels for the multi-author cozy mystery series Secrets of the Castleton Manor Library. Working in a world of hazardous substances regulation, Catherine's stories often have an environmental or factory-based theme, and others reflect her love of the Colorado mountains. RT is a retired federal agent with 25 years of experience working the street, from riding the go-fast boats with customs off the midnight Miami coast to hunt smugglers, to running down fugitives in Jamaica. He's shared his experiences with surveillance and workshops for writers, including right here at RMMWA, with more than 145, published stories, short stories. He has sold 44?
45.
45 to Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, and has 6 ebooks for Kindle and other e-readers, plus quite a few print novels. And then I am the one who has only published 1 short story, which is why I'm the moderator. But it did pretty well. It's in the Best American Mystery Stories of 2019, which came out last October. And with that said, we are going to start by asking the panelists to tell us what their first short story that they ever wrote was and what inspired them to write it. And we will start with Catherine.
Well, I've been writing stories since I was old enough to read and write and hold a pencil. I can't remember that far back in time to what the first story I wrote was. But I do remember very well the first short story that I sold, which is actually in this issue of the April 2013 issue of Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine. I'd sent a few stories to them and had them rejected, but I was stubborn and just kept trying. The story, I wrote it to release some steam because I had an insufferable, bigoted, backstabbing coworker that was driving me insane. And I took my revenge writing a story, but when the story sold and then it was published, I couldn't brag about it at work because I was afraid she'd go get it and recognize herself. And then that would mean a trip to HR when she saw that she was brutally murdered in my story. And so that was my first published story.
Great. I think that these people, I don't think they do recognize themselves. I don't think they realize how awful they are. But keep it safe. Okay, RT, do you remember what your story, the first story you wrote, and what inspired you?
Excuse me. The first story that I completed, I was working undercover on motorcycle gangs, and I was reading Easy Rider magazine for background. And they had a story in there that was pretty bad. So I decided I could do better. So I wrote a story and submitted it, and they bought it for $250. And that was the start of my writing for fun and profit.
Great. Okay. All right, you don't write novels. You only write shorts, is that right?
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
The one novel I wrote is what they call a throwaway novel. And I write short, so I can conceive of a plot from here to here, but a novel is from here to way out there. So for me to write that first throwaway novel, I had to look at it as 28 short stories all linked together and not being fully completed because they didn't have an ending in order to keep the story going for the novel.
Okay. All right. I'm going to talk about like the first short story that I wrote. Like Catherine, I can't really remember because I wrote them, and I just loved telling lies when I was a kid. I loved it. Making things up, getting people to listen to them, these wild stories. I mean, nobody really believed that I had a volcano in my backyard, but you know. Anyway, but when I was in maybe high school, I started writing a novel, and I got pretty far into it, like maybe 100 pages. And I had this whole plot lined up. And then one day I was riding around with some friends, and I heard a rock song on the radio that was the entire plot of my novel in 2.5 minutes. And I thought, maybe I could make it a short story. And then I thought, maybe I should just give up on this and do something a little different for a while. Okay, so
Can I add
you
something
certainly
first?
can.
Okay, the story that Suzanne has in Best American Mysteries is written in second person point of view, which is something that's really hard to carry off. So to write a story in that point of view and get it into that book is pretty good. What happens is Otto Penzler, the editor, has a reader, Michelle Sloan, and she reads thousands of stories every year, and then she gives the best ones to Otto. Otto reads those and picks out the 50 best, and then every year they have a guest editor for the anthology, and that guest editor picks out his favorite 20. I have made the other distinguished stories list 3 times, but I've never made it into the top 20. So she did good.
Thank you. And thanks for explaining that. I have no idea. It was a complete shock to me. I couldn't believe it at first. I thought, this is somebody's idea of a joke. I really did. Okay, so I'm going to say, what are the challenges of writing short stories? And if you write novels, how are they easier and how are they harder? I mean, obviously they're easier because they're shorter, but aside from that, what are compare them.
Okay. Writing short stories is not easier than writing a novel, in my opinion. I worked harder on the story in this magazine, my first sale, and subsequent published short stories, word for word, than I do on novels, because every word counts. The focus has to be razor sharp, and I do revision after revision after revision, lots of cutting. I would say writing short fiction has definitely improved my novel writing because it's made me more aware of keeping that focus and making every word count. So what's different, the main thing that's different between short fiction and writing a novel is that kind of focus. You have a smaller cast of characters. Any secondary characters tend to be you have to write them with a really crisp, they're pretty flat characters, but they've got to be vivid. And in a novel, you can develop those secondary characters into 3-dimensional people. And also in a novel, you can have different plot lines, different storylines running. It can get quite complex. In a short story, you do that at your peril. You want to have one main solid plot line, and you can have a few other things going on, but you've got to be really careful because it's all going to have to wrap up real quick.
Okay. Do you have anything to say about that? Or just,
No.
yeah, okay. I mean, I did not mean to imply that it was easy. I was just saying easier than a novel.
Less.
No.
No.
Yeah, no, okay. All right. What is, okay, I guess I go with the order. What would be your advice to people about writing short stories? What would you tell us? What's your advice for somebody who wants to attempt it? RT?
Pick a topic that you know about, that you're familiar with, because readers can tell real quick if you're making stuff up. And besides that, it adds more flavor if you can put some details in there to more or less teach the reader something new that they didn't know. Get their interest by telling them facts about something that they had no idea about, whether it's the wine industry or Wall Street, whatever it is.
Okay.
Oh, this is my advice. Okay. I'd say if you are wanting to be published traditionally, and by traditionally I mean in a magazine or an e-zine or an anthology, just write the best story you possibly can, because you're going to have a lot of competition. Know your market. I have a friend that wrote a short for a magazine and sent it in, and they were like, wow, this is really great, but here's a copy of our magazine. Can you write something else for us? And she was a nice little Christian lady, and it was a very risque magazine. And so you had better read your magazine or the market you're trying to get into before you send them anything, to see if your work, your style fits. And then something RT and I have talked about and suggested to other writers is start at your top market. Where do you really want to get published? Start at the top, and then if it gets sent back, know where you're going to send it next and next. There aren't that many short story markets, but go for the top and work your way down.
Okay. And how many rejections do you get typically before you finally sell? Oh, okay. One thing I want to say, do you keep chipping away? Like, I had a tendency to keep sending stories to the same magazines, and I actually developed kind of a relationship with the fiction editors of some of these magazines. I still never sold one, but I got nice notes on them. How many, I mean, do you just keep chipping away? Is that a strategy?
To some degree, you can do that, yeah. If you get encouragement from the editor, I like your work, but it's not quite right for our magazine or for this issue, or we've got another story like that. Yeah, keep sending them something else, wear them down to some degree. But if you can establish a relationship like you were talking about, especially if you can meet them at a conference or something. We were at the Las Vegas BoucherCon, and the editor, Linda Landrigan, told me to meet her in the conference bar, and she'd buy a couple of drinks. So okay, went in the bar, but a lot of other people were in the bar too, because that's a favorite gathering spot. It's a meeting spot for other authors, agents, publishers, editors. And there was an empty table, and it only had one chair. So I told her to sit down, and I'd find another chair. Well, off to my right was a table, two chairs, one guy standing up. So I went over and I explained to him, I'm meeting with my editor, can I borrow one of these chairs? Yeah, go ahead. So I take the chair, go over and sit down. In the meantime, this guy at the bar now has two drinks in his hand, and he comes back to that table to my right, and he says, where's my chair? Well, his buddy says, well, I loaned it to this guy. So he came over to our table, and I explained it to him, and I introduced him to the editor. Turned out it was the chapter president of the Northwest chapter, and he and I are good friends now. I introduced him to Linda, and he sold a story to her shortly after that because he told her he was a short story writer and he would like to sell a story, and she said, yeah, submit it. So it worked out, and that was the first short story he ever sold. You know, if you can build a relationship, go ahead.
Okay. What about, do either one of you use agents, your agents for short stories?
Most magazines don't want agents submittals, and most agents don't want to work short stories because their commission's not that high. Now, if you're a famous novelist, yeah, they will sell your short stories for you.
Okay. And you know,
I agree.
yeah, okay. Yeah, CJ.
Along that line,
Mm-hmm.
how difficult would it be to assemble a collection of short stories, have an agent submit those to a publisher for you?
Okay. The question is, how difficult would it be to assemble a collection, I'm assuming your own collection, of short stories and have an agent sell that for you? And I don't know the answer. I think it might actually be pretty difficult because I've heard that short story collections are a hard sell. However, if you were a big name, I think it would be a lot easier. Now, you've got a collection that you assemble yourself and no
True,
agent required.
True. There's an author by the name of John Floyd, and he has done that, but I don't know if he went through an agent or if he got an editor interested. I think he got an editor interested. And generally that's small houses because short story collections don't make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I know that I have never done this, although I was in a writing group where we wrote short stories with prompts, but both of you guys have sold to anthologies that had themes. Did you write to the theme, or did you just happen to have a story lying around that fit? Go ahead.
Both.
Okay.
My series for the holiday burglars, the theme is always a burglary or a crime that takes place during a holiday, and thank goodness there's plenty of them out there. So I always write to the holiday, but in all my stories, the general theme is bad guys ripping off other bad guys through scams or cons of some type. But my bad guy is the one you're rooting for because he's a better person than the ones that he's ripping off. So it's kind of a strange relationship for the reader to cheer for a bad guy, but like I say, he's the better of the two evils.
Okay, how about Die Behind the Wheel? That was obviously themed.
That was a Steely Dan themed anthology, and each author had to write a story that went with the theme of one of Steely Dan's songs. And I'm trying to remember the name of the song I used now. But that one was a invite And I got invited because the editor was the chapter president of the Northwest chapter.
A theme here, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so yeah, another theme coming through.
Hey 19?
Beg pardon?
I said hey 19?
Hey 19.
Hey 19? Is that-
Oh, that wasn't a song. Is
Oh,
that
okay.
what you're thinking of? No.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'm just trying to think of the Steely Dan. I never knew their titles. I mean, I listened to the songs. I didn't know what the title was. Okay, now you wrote, you've got, yeah,
The only
Blood and Gasoline.
every short story I've written had published is in Alfred Hitchcock, except for one in this anthology. And it was by invitation. And it's edited by our own Mario Acevedo. And he kind of was casting about for a few more stories and asked if I had anything that would fit. And I was like, I'll send you a story I have that was a little more raw than I usually write, because you know I'm a cozy author. I don't want anybody to get hurt too bad. The story in here was edgier, and so I sent it to Mario, and he's like, "Yeah, I like this, but can you do this and this and this?" And I'm like, I have to hurt people. but he's a really good editor, and so I didn't mind, and I'm really proud of the story that ended up in here. But yeah, it was by invitation.
Okay.
And it is themed. It had to have blood and gasoline in it, and so it does.
Okay.
One more theme story. The first anthology I ever got into, I was reading the markets on the Short Mystery Fiction Society, and I submitted a story, and it had to be, the title of the anthology was Somebody Died in Here. And you had to write a story in an outhouse, a bathroom, something like that. The pay was $25 and a can of air freshener. So I wrote a story about an arrest in Kansas City, where we got a call that a guy we had a warrant for, Bopper, was going to show up at a heroin house. So we set up surveillance, had a van and some cars, and sure enough, Bopper showed up. Now, we had always wanted to get into the house, but didn't have enough for a search warrant. So we staged it. When Bopper got up on the front porch, we come squealing in, you know, in our cars, brakes sliding, popping over the curb, you know, jumping out, hollering federal agents. And Bopper did exactly what we wanted. He ran in the house. Well, there's a thing called hot pursuit. You don't need a search warrant when you are in hot pursuit of a criminal. And like I say, we had an arrest warrant for Bopper. So Bopper went in the house, we went in the house. Well, I didn't get to go in the house. I was a young agent then, and young agents got assigned to the outside because nothing ever happened out there. So Bopper goes in, he tries to go out the back, but the landlord said, you're not going through here. So Bopper made a left-hand turn, went up the stairs to the second floor. My partner and some other guys that were from the Kansas City, Missouri Vice, those guys, when you went through a door, you had to fight each other to be first. That's how enthusiastic they were. They went in, they made a left turn, went up the stairs. Bopper now goes up to the third floor, thundering herds right behind him. You know, I'm out front, another green agent is at the back, and nothing's going on, nothing ever happens outside. So a guy had come out, gotten a blue Cadillac, and I needed something to do. So I went over, tinned him, got him out of the car, spread him and searched him, patted him down, excuse me, found some heroin on him. And as I've got my back turned to the house, I hear breaking glass. What had happened was Lewis was up there with his 2 bags of heroin and a couple of guns, and he heard the thundering herd coming up. He had 2 other people that he was selling to at the time. They freaked, they went out the front windows and dropped down on the roof of the porch. So I hear breaking glass, I turn around, they both got guns. So I whipped around my friend and put my gun on his shoulder and told him not to move, and told the guys on the roof to drop their guns, which they did because they didn't have anywhere to go. And then we stayed like that for 10, 15 minutes till I get somebody to get them off the roof. Bopper wanted to go through the windows that the other 2 had gone through, but it was too crowded. So he went to the bathroom and went through that window, dropped down on the cement drive, broke his leg, and got away from us for 2 hours because I obviously didn't see him and the guy in back didn't see him. And so that was more or less my story, with a few additions to make it a story.
That a guy with a broken leg eluded you for 2 hours?
Yeah, he did. But we got him and took him into court. We had to put him in a office chair with rollers and roll him in front of the judge. And we had to take him to the hospital before jail.
Sounds like you've got a lot of things that could make good stories. I remember that anthology because I think Mike Bethler had a story in there too, didn't he? Yeah, the bathroom version, whatever.
He may have, I don't know.
One of our former presidents, chapter presidents. Okay, you mentioned that Mario is an editor. How much editing in general, like when you, in Alfred Hitchcock or in the anthologies, how much editing do you guys get?
Mario, for this anthology, a lot, because he was trying to get me to sculpt my story into something to fit with this theme. When I send in something to Alfred Hitchcock, it's got to be perfect. I revise so heavily. Linda does very little editing at all to a story. If she likes it, it's because it's all together.
Okay. How about you? I mean, you obviously, Alfred Hitchcock would be the same.
To tell you the truth, I never read my story once it's published, and I've never compared it to see if she does any. But she's got a first reader that she'll give stuff to. And in this, I used in one of the stories, I used the term "and all the rushes." And the first reader come back and said, shouldn't that be all the Russians? And, which made sense. But I then sent them a treaty that the US had made with Russia, in which that term was used, the Tsar of all the Russias.
Okay.
And they've never questioned me on anything since. So I don't know on that. When I got a story in the Mystery Writers of America anthology, that was heavy editing.
Oh, okay.
And that was the first time I found out it was not Alfred Hitchcock's mystery magazine. There was no apostrophe S, but the editors had a big argument over which way it should be. And I think when you look at the covers now, there is no apostrophe S, but in the beginning, there used to be.
It looks like there's a dagger that serves as an apostrophe.
These do not have, it's just Alfred Hitchcock, but look at the most current issue.
Aha.
Oh, they put it back?
They put.
I don't know if you
It's
guys
not
can
on
see
the
this.
other ones.
It's not exactly an apostrophe. Like I said, it's a dagger. But But the S is there, and the S isn't on these others. Okay.
Okay, interesting.
They made some suggestions. They did, and they were good. Overall, they were good suggestions. I didn't take all of them, and I also did, when I saw it again after I hadn't seen it in, 5 months, I had some, I can't retype my own stuff word perfect without changing stuff. It's really hard for me to actually read it, a paragraph or two at a reading, because I so want to edit it. So, so I made some changes of my own. But they did make some suggestions, and they said, this one place isn't clear, and then there was one place where they said, I think you've got the wrong character quoted. I didn't, but I had left out a whole line. So it was the wrong character because I had left out what the other character said, not because I got the name wrong. And so, there were things like that. The very sharp-eyed, editors of the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Anthology, they sent me they sent a red-lined copy, which was the first time that I had been on the receiving end one of those, although I've sent out many of them. So it was kind of interesting. Now, to get into this anthology, the right book, yeah, this one, as far as I can tell, they wanted it just word for word the way it was in the original anthology, because it's a reprint. So I didn't have to worry. And like RT, I never read them. After they're in print. It's like I'm afraid to, or I don't know, done with that story. I don't know.
I can't. I do.
You do?
Yeah.
I open it and make sure that my name's spelled right, and it's like, okay. Yeah.
I guess I want to see. It's like I sold this story, and it's in here, and I read Alfred Hitchcock because I like the magazine, and there's some incredible authors in there, great stories, and so sometimes I have to read mine just to see how did I get in here.
Okay. Now we have one kind of last issue, which is, can you make a living as a short story writer? What do you think? I don't think I could.
It depends on your standard of living, I guess. If you just need the occasional can of beans and a cardboard box to live in,
Okay.
you can do well.
It helps to have a pension. I think the last short story writer that made a living was Ed Hoch, H-O-C-H, and he had one story in every issue of Ellery Queen, plus stories in Alfred and anthologies. He's dead now. There are two guys, Michael Bracken and John Floyd, that are very prolific, and they probably could. Well, Michael does make a living, but he also edits anthologies and other work, so it's not purely short stories.
Okay. Well, I know.
What is the range of payments that you've seen?
Okay, the question is, what is the range of payments that you've seen?
Well, I think, and correct me if I get this wrong, but the three top paying mystery short story markets are The Strand, Alfred Hitchcock, and Ellery Queen. And you can make several $100s for a short story. They pay per word.
How much per word? Yeah.
Okay, Alfred Hitchcock recently changed their rates. It used to be 8 cents a word for everybody, and now they've lowered it 8 cents a word for those that have been published by them before, and 5 cents a word for newbies coming in. I was surprised a little bit to see that,
That's
but
terrible.
it matches what Ellery Queen has. Yeah, 8 cents to 5 cents.
Does Ellery Queen pay better, or is it the same?
About the same, yeah.
And The Strand?
I don't
Strand's
know.
$150 a story.
100?
Takes forever. to get a response from them, or that's the common complaint. The best paying market is Woman's World. It's $500 for a 750 word mini mystery. I've sold 10 of those, but they changed editors and I can't get back in again. So
A 150 word mini mystery.
750.
Well,
Yeah.
RT recommended that when I first started coming to these meetings and we were carpooling, RT said, you should try writing a short story. And I was like, and he said, $500 Women's World. And I was like, by golly, I'm going to do it. I wrote about 10 different mini mysteries and didn't sell any of them. Excuse me. But I learned so much about short fiction because in that amount of space, you have to know what you're doing. And I never hit it right for that market, but it was a great learning.
750 words, that's what they want.
Yep, it had to be in a certain format because at the end you had to leave enough room within that 750 words for the solution, which they print like upside down or something.
But they take 52 stories a year. So,
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
You got a chance.
so you could
Yeah.
be one of the 52.
yes, yeah, you could.
Okay. Well, I know at one point there were a lot more short story markets, I think. And I noticed that there were also a lot of TV shows like The Twilight Zone would say from a short story by, for example, Ed Hawk, whatever. And I could keep waiting for somebody to come and say, hey, we'd like to turn your short story into a TV show, but it hasn't happened. And I don't even know if it does happen anymore. So, okay, any more questions? Yes.
So RT and I have talked a little bit about this, but discuss finding markets for your short story.
Okay, the question is finding markets for your short stories.
If you join Short Mystery Fiction Society, they keep a market list of mystery publications that, want short stories. And they would tell you the word count they want, the theme they want, and what they pay. There's other online markets you can check, like editors and predators, and but you have to subscribe to it. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if they charge. It used to be free. Also, Duotrope and what is it? Raylon?
Raylan.com.
Yeah. Okay.
Raylan.com?
That's RALAN.
RALAN.com.
And
Thanks.
those three are not just mysteries. I mean, you'll find all genres there. Other than that, go to your bookstore and find a magazine that publishes short stories, which is getting hard to do, and look them up online and find out what their guidelines are. If you decide you want to write for Woman's World, send me an email and I'll send you their guidelines, because you can't find them online.
Are they online and very carefully disguised, or just
They
not
may
even there?
be. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
know.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if you're serious about short fiction, that the short mystery fiction society is you need to join, and also you have to be a member of that to be eligible for Derringer Awards. And actually,
Derringer
have
Awards.
you won it? I know you've been finalist.
Once again, 3 times I've been a nominee, but never a bride.
But you have to be a member, and it's free. So if you're publishing short fiction, you should be in that group.
Yeah, and as far as the anthologies, it seems like the thing to do is just like RT did, network. meet people at the bar, get to know them, and get critique group, whatever. ZJ.
So I'm curious about your writing strategy. So how long does it take you to write a short story? And then how many short stories do you have in a queue? Are you constantly sending out pieces? Are you constantly working on new story ideas? How does that work?
Okay, the question here is, how long does it take to write a typical short story? And how many short stories do you have in the queue? And then I forgot the rest of it, but
I'd like to go first.
Go
'Cause I
ahead.
think your
Okay.
answer will be a lot longer than mine.
Okay.
I'm doing good to write one short story a year. And it takes me probably longer than most people to write and polish and send out a story. So about one a year.
okay. And I will answer how long it took to write my story that is in here. It was like, I don't have an hour amount, but it was about 2 days. And the story here is, this was in February of 2017, and I was having a really bad month. February is typically an awful month for me. My cat was dying. I was taking the cat to the vet like once a week and spending like $500 every time I did it. It was really depressing. I was working on a novel. I was kind of stuck at the novel. And somewhere in the middle of the month, I thought, well, I'll write a Valentine's Day story. Now, as a Valentine's Day story, as a romance goes, if you've read the story, it's a little twisted. But anyway, so I sat down, one day, and I wrote the beginning, the very beginning of it, and then I wrote the end. And then the next day, I looked at it and I thought, this isn't bad. So I filled in the middle. And I wrote it all out in longhand. And then I just kind of like didn't do much with it. And then I saw, I thought, well, I'll type it up. So I typed it up, and as is typical with me, I made quite a few changes as I typed it from longhand, and then I started sending it out. And then I saw the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers call for their anthology, and I thought, well, this sounds perfect for that. I'll just send it to them. So, and they took it. So I would like to add, I mean, some of you have read it and some of you hadn't, but as far as verisimilitude goes, I have a feeling that all writers are all the characters in all their works. And I have to say that, this basically, the story is about a guy who's really underemployed and he's working as a dog walker. And he gets involved with a woman who's a hand model. And I am a dog walker right now. If you have a dog that needs walked, you can call me up and I'll go walk the dog for money. And in my youth, I was a hand model. I had nice hands when I was young. And the reason I'm not a hand model anymore is because it's a very annoying thing. The list of things you cannot ever, ever, ever do if you want to make a living as a hand model include writing with a fountain pen, wearing rings, opening car doors because you'll break your nails. It's like you basically would have to encase your hands in something and go around and have other people do everything for you. So that's why that didn't work out for me as a career. Anyway.
But that's what I was talking about when I say write what you know. You can put things in from your background. I'm a slow writer. And I would say to you, whatever method you can use to write your story, do it. I generally try to keep 4 story starts going so that on any given day, I can pick the one that interests me most to write about. I'll be laying in bed and wake up in the morning and I'll have an idea about a character in a situation. So I'll write it as far as it goes, 1,000 words, 1,500 words, and then I don't know where it's going. So I put it in inventory. But I try to keep 4 of those going to cut down on writer's block. If I get tired of one story, I can bump over to another one and write on that. It takes 10 months now to get a response from Alfred Hitchcock. So I'm sending them a story about every 2 to 3 months. I keep 3 to 5 in their e-slush pile so that I don't have to worry about sending them a story, waiting 10 months for a response, because I know that every 2 months I'm going to get a response, one way or another.
Is that, so you can't jump the line when you're one of their valued authors?
Oh, no.
Oh,
no, no.
oh my goodness.
No, somehow it takes the same amount of time, but as I understand it, once you're published, you skip the first reader and go to the editor. But I don't see any difference in time.
Oh my goodness, 10 months.
So.
Well, I knew it took them a long time because, I've submitted things to them and it takes forever. Ellery Queen is a lot faster.
Oh, yeah.
30 days to a rejection, yes.
Oh, you can get
Huh?
you can get rejected by Ellery Queen so fast, it'll make your head spin.
Well, that's good though, because then you can send it somewhere. You go down the list of your markets, right? You start with Ellery Queen because they're
Yeah,
fast, and
right.
and then you go to Alfred Hitchcock or the Strand. How long does the Strand take? They're pretty
Uh,
slow,
people
right?
have-
Never hear again.
Yeah,
Oh,
people talk
okay.
about 2 years.
2 years.
Yes, and yet some people get accepted, 90 days. I don't know what makes the difference. Evidently, Andrew, the editor, likes the story and he takes it right away. And if he doesn't like it, he must put it aside and forget about it
Oh, okay.
until you bump him and he's, oh yeah, that's a rejection. So
If you haven't heard back in 2 years, forget it. We don't want it.
Do you recycle rejection?
Do you recycle? The question is, do you recycle your rejections? And I'm going to answer yes.
I had, I had a story. Well, I had a rejection from Woman's World magazine, $500 rejection. And I sold the same story to Swimming Kangaroo for $25. I mean, it's quite a come down, but a sale's a sale.
Swimming kangaroo.
Swimming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I was internationally published. The editor had a name like Dingy or something like that. And I'm going, yeah, he's native Australian. I got the check from Fort Worth, Texas.
Hey, well, mate.
Yeah.
Okay, you recycle?
I've actually not had time in my schedule, but I've got a backlog of rejected stories that I have the intention someday, maybe when I'm retired, going through those stories and seeing what's worth working on. And maybe even doing a collection like RT has done, the self-published collection. Some of them are previously published stories and some are fresh ones.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's a possibility in the future, just not right now.
And I know a lot of people have short stories up on like Amazon for short stories for Kindle, and they're always like 99 cents. So, and then whereas what? You can get whole novels for 99 cents, but you can also get short stories for 99 cents. So, I mean, there's a market, I guess.
Yeah,
Possibly.
Time. You got to go through the time to
do
all the stuff to get it up there.
Okay, well, I think we have time for one more question if anyone has one. Okay.
How about influences, stylistic heroes or something like, you're very Runyon-esque.
Okay. The question is influences, and it has been observed that RT is Runyon-esque.
Elmore Leonard, that's my favorite. Robert Howard, who wrote the Conan series, he had several other books that I read too, other series, which were good. Those are probably my main ones.
Okay.
That and Chester Himes. He wrote stories about two black detectives in Harlem, Gravedigger Jones and Coffin Ed. So those three guys, yeah.
Okay. I mean, mine is like kind of classical. I admire, I don't I don't think anyone would compare me to her, but I really liked Flannery O'Connor. And these weren't technically mysteries, although sometimes they were crime stories.
Yeah, it's too broad, but the
It is.
first couple of short stories I really fell in love with weren't that short, and I don't write really short. They're long. I write long short fiction. But Billy Budd by Herman Melville.
Oh,
Wow. And
Yeah.
and Shirley Jackson, The Lottery.
Shirley Jackson. Yeah,
There's a
there's
couple.
another one. Yeah, good one, good one. Okay, that's it. Thank you, RT. Thank you, Catherine.